Hi, welcome to Tell Me I'm Pretty Please. I'm Shauna, and today we are not having a guest. My friend Danielle was going to join us today, but we ended up having some scheduling conflicts. She had to put a pet down last night, so she's unable to join us. So we had to pivot today, but that's okay. We'll get Danielle another time, and are really hoping that she's doing okay and everyone's feeling okay at her home. We love her very much. But yeah, welcome. Week 2 of this podcast, and I still don't really know how to make a podcast. Um, but I'm having fun doing it, and that's the most important part, right? So, because it's my podcast and because I had to pivot, I get to talk about whatever the hell I want. This past week I didn't really do too much, but I did have a friend in town. She's a friend of mine, MB. She's a friend of mine through work. She is a volunteer for a client that I used to work on. I mean, her and I worked very closely together over the couple of years I was on that client. But she was in town over the weekend with some friends, and her and I met up for a drink, and had a really good conversation, a really good catch up. Um, and then I'm really just, taking a week off before heading back to work. Go back to work on Monday, April 6th. So just kind of giving myself a little spring break, celebrating Easter this weekend with my family. Um, and so, with that being said, I kind of decided to pivot a little bit and, celebrate our Lord and Savior, Reese's peanut butter eggs, by talking about a conversation that we just don't have enough. We don't feel comfortable having. A vast majority of Americans do not like talking about this. Politics. Dun dun. All right. I feel like I need to preface this whole conversation with my political and probably religious stance. Jokingly, I'm a matriarchal anarchist. Um, not loving government and not loving men. And I think the men will take care of themselves. And now that the enlistment age is 42 for the army, um, yeah, I think they'll take care of themselves, and then women can just run small little communities at their will. Um, but in reality, I'm pretty liberal. I lean super left, vote Democrat. Um, Probably lean a little bit more socialist than a Democrat, more Bernie Sanders, but very proud Democrat. I cried voting for both Obama and Hillary Clinton. I just thought it was so cool to be able to have the honor to vote for a black man and a woman. I thought it was just so fucking cool. We need more of that. Um, my biggest stance politically is like I just don't think that politicians should be making laws about things that they don't know anything about. Um, I think if it's something, that is morally driven, that's not going to negatively impact the health and safety of others, it's got no right to be a political conversation. Um, Gay marriage, pro-choice, like just basic human rights should not be a political conversation in my opinion. Um, I also, do not support a lot of the immigration laws that we have on both sides. I don't believe in immigration laws on stolen land. Um, if you're a white person, go back to your fucking country too. Like we're so proud to be Irish until a brown person's trying to be American. Right? So like get your shit together. That's just, my opinion. Um, Religiously, I grew up Catholic. I identify Irish Catholic. more culturally than religiously anymore. I don't really practice, but I did go to Catholic school for quite a few years in elementary school. I did go through most of the rites. I'm obviously, not dead, so I did not get the anointing of the sick, and I'm not a nun or married, so, like, I'm missing a few there, but I'm confirmed. Um, yeah, I don't go to church, I don't really practice religion. I find religion more interesting as something to be studied than, like, something to be followed. Um, However, I do love a good Easter service when it's like that late night Easter service that's candlelight and they do the whole, like, Stations of the Cross. I love a play. So, um, yeah, I love a play, and watching Jesus get crucified every year is if the church does it, it's really fucking cool. Um, so yeah, that's kind of, just a overview of my opinion, where I stand with a lot of, these big conversations. Um, and I was, I'm one of those people that I grew up Democrat. My family is pretty liberal. My grandparents are Kennedy Democrats. I have a hippy dippy aunt that does every single protest known to man. My mom tags along with some of those. I just grew up grew up with Democrats, so, like, and I am, like, the epitome of somebody who grew up with that political viewpoint and kinda just stuck with it. And, like, I also really love learning other people's viewpoints, other people's, opinions, other people's understandings of things, interpretations. I do like having those conversations, so I do try to open up a lot of those conversations when I have the opportunity to. But I really didn't grow up around with a lot of conservatives. My dad and my brother are probably the only Republicans in my, like, direct family, my immediate family. Um, my dad's side of the family, we never really talked politics. I can assume that they are conservative, vote Republican if they vote at all, but we never talked politics. I don't even know that we've ever, like, said the president's name to each other. Um, but I'm also, very, very, like, stuck in my ways. Like, I will admit that I'm very opinionated and very stubborn. Like, I will say it to your face. Like, I'm not shy about other people hearing my opinions or what people are gonna think about me based off of my opinions. If I say, like, I won't say anything out loud that I won't say with my full chest. So that's also, I guess, probably made it hard for me to develop relationships with people of opposing viewpoints because I tend to be very, "This is how I believe, this is what I think." I don't believe that you should think that same way, but I have opinions and I like to share my opinions, okay? Yeah, I really love a good soapbox in case you couldn't tell. Um, but yeah, so my brother and my dad are probably the only 2, like, Republicans in my family, and I really don't have much of a relationship with them. My brother stopped talking to me when I spoiled his superheroes for him. He just could not cope with the fact that Tony Stark might not be MAGA, and that Steve Rogers is anti-fascist, anti-Nazi propaganda. It blew his entire world up, and now we don't talk. My dad is very much like the type of dad who's like, "Yeah, I voted for Trump, but, I don't really understand politics or care to reach them that much. I just, you know, tax policy." Like, "Okay, I cool. Must be nice to make enough money to care about tax policy," is all I have to say. Um, but yeah, that's those are my biggest, like, direct pools of Republican, my dad and my brother. That's not to say I don't have conservative friends. So my friend MB, who I was getting drinks with over the weekend, is conservative. Um, but she's not a Trump supporter. In my opinion, is that like MAGA, Make America Great Again, that the Trump supporting population and the rah rah Trump supporters, those like, election deniers. I personally try to separate them from being Republican. I try to separate the two, um, because I do believe that the Republican Party does have, they have their own reasons, they have their own agenda, they have their own beliefs, all of this stuff. But we cohabitated so well together for so long. Um, and there was just such respect between the political parties pre-Trump, that I really don't wanna discredit people who vote Republican who maybe don't believe in Donald Trump or don't support him. Um, yeah, I don't wanna, like, say that they're not out there, right? Like, Donald Trump never won the popular vote. He's this is factual information. The Federal Bureau of, Elections, the Federal Election Bureau puts out the report of the election numbers every single election. You can look it up. Um, he has never won more than 49% of the popular vote in all 3 elections. Um, and only about 95% of all registered Republican voters voted for Donald Trump. So, yeah, vast, vast, vast majority of Republicans voted for Donald Trump, but, there is that 5%, that doesn't necessarily never necessarily believed in him and never trusted him to be president or however they feel. And now his current approval rating is, like, in the hole. Again, these numbers are from Rutgers. But about 36% of the whole nation, approves of, like, the Trump administration, and only about 56% of the Republican Party has faith in the Trump administration right now. So just some numbers to throw out there just for some context while we get into this, little bit of a rough topic. We also we talked about, kind of being set in, like, what you were raised in. Interestingly enough, I thought this would have been the complete opposite. But I love a fun fact. Part of why this I'm doing this podcast is because I love a research project, so I get to do a mini research project every single week. Um, 56% of current registered Republicans are actually raised Democrat. Where does that number come from? And why is that such like a crazy that's almost half, right? Almost half of the Republicans are actually raised Democrat. So why the switch? Um, 68% of that total are people over 65. So it's the baby boomer generation who, their parents were more democratic. Her parents were immigrants. They were like, they made unions, like, they made the labor unions, like, that was, like, industrial revolution. Like, their parents and grandparents, were, like, the pre-war generations. It was a much different time, um, completely different type of politics at the time. But yeah, 68% of the Republicans who were raised Democrat and switched to Republican, as an adult, 68% of them are over 65 years old. Um, so yeah, it's, kind of it's bipartisan, right? Like, there's a huge bipartisan disconnect right now that is, we've had blips of it in the past, right? Where your political affiliation was publicly tied to your character. Um like like the Civil War, excuse me, the Civil War or the Civil Rights Movement, a lot of like there's obviously blips of these larger, more like not socialist, societal focused arguments that, were very important for one party over another. They've happened before. But we're going on like 10 years of it being like if you are a Republican, you are a homophobic racist. If you are a Democrat, you are a baby murdering commie, right? Like those are kind of generalizing, but those are kind of the big, assumptions about people. Those are like the arguments that we make as to why we can't be friends with somebody who votes differently. Um, we call it like a dueling reality. That's what the studies have been calling it. It's like this dueling reality of like the Republicans believe their belief is right and just and morally accurate. And the Democrats also believe that they are right and just and morally correct. And the other party is corrupt. And yeah, it's this overgeneralization of incredibly nuanced, complicated, independent ways of thinking that are, the major points of like our two-party political system here. So, what's the psychology here, right? Like why does this conversation have to switch? Why do we have to go from cutting out people in our lives because of the way that they vote or the political party they affiliate with, um, instead of cutting them out entirely, why do we need to open these conversations? What's the psychology here? Um, Psychology Today says that there are 3 parts to a solid friendship. You have to be labeled as a dictionary definition of a friendship. It should have these 3 parts. It should have like this um pleasure aspect. You enjoy spending time together. You guys enjoy doing things together. You find pleasure in each other's company. Then there is this duty, this sense of just like being, ride or die with your friends. Like you feel a sense of responsibility for their happiness, their enjoyment, their safety. And it's reciprocated. And then empathy, right? Like you're willing to sit with them, hear them out, listen to what they have to say, um, and just empathize with them. So when you decide you're going to create this disconnect, this this divide in your friendship because of political views, like basically what you're saying is like, I do not have a duty to you and I do not have the empathy for you to sit here and talk with you and hear you out. You're basically saying like our friendship is completely contingent on my beliefs. If you do not agree with my beliefs, we can't be friends. Um, which in some cases is totally okay, right? Like there are going to definitely be situations where you realize like your friend is or this person is just there's no justifying this. There's no justifying their behavior. And some examples for me in this specific conversation would be like people who are supporting ICE, people who are actively joining ICE. Like no, like if you are supporting what ICE has been doing over the past year in our country and you think that it's okay that, you know, that it's justified that, we're murdering people, that we're tearing children out of their parents' arms. Like, you and I just can't we can't be friends. Like, but I don't think I would ever have called you a friend if that's really how you believe. I like to think that I kind of have the ability to figure out, like, people who do not align with my, like, morals and values. Like, I don't have the patience to try to figure that out or justify a lot of that. Like, if you cannot tell me why your actions are justifiable and they're not reasonable to me, like, that's a whole different conversation. So we're not talking about that, right? We're talking about cutting out your friends because of their political affiliation more so than, like, these deeper conversations. It's really that our political views have become tied to our morals, our core values, and our character in a way that they just never have before, right? Like, it's if again, like, a lot of Democrats, like, just view Republicans as being, like, pro-life, anti anti-immigration, like, a lot of these, these, in our opinions, like, violations of human rights, whereas, like, Republicans are seeing it as, "No, like, our money is dwindling, we gotta, protect the people who are natural and, like, American citizens and our finances and our money and our sanctions and all of that stuff, we have to protect those, and if we bring in too many people, if we allow too many people into our country, it's going to, like, negatively impact." Like, there is some justification for why people believe the things that they believe, right, on both sides. Um, but when we get into the conversations of, like, Black Lives Matter and, sexual assault survivors and the Epstein files and, um, some of these more heavy hitting topics that really, really do play a little bit of part in, like, your character, your values. Um, those are different conversations than just finding out your friend's a Republican and saying, "Okay, bye." Like, or finding out your friend's a Democrat and saying, "Okay, never mind, bye." Because you're really just closing off. You're not closing off conversations. You're closing off again, like, somebody who directly, you know disagrees with, like, your core values and your morals. I think that's a totally reasonable thing to do in my opinion. Um, but when you play the bigger picture here, when you put it into a larger perspective and you are realizing, "Oh, I'm just cutting off friends because they identify as Republican, they vote," like, you're really closing off, like, these conversations, this ability to have this conversation. You're putting yourself at risk of being inside this information bubble that is, just kind of affirming your views, your perspective, your understanding of things, right? Like, this person is telling you the apple is orange. So you're just gonna believe that and you thought the apple was orange, so yeah, the apple's obviously orange as opposed to, like, somebody being like, "Well, like, there's a couple apples can be green or red, or they have all sorts of different colors, and, here's what makes those different colors and what makes those up, and, like, the flavors of those different colors," and kind of, like, where I'm coming from when I say I like a red apple over a green apple, and, um, opening up those conversations is is just important for, like, human growth, right? Like, that's how we learn, that's how we engage, that's how we connect to people, is by having these conversations. Um, the less it also opens your mind up to, like, being open to other people. Um, Pew Research, one of the, big data collecting, organizations in this country, bipartisan, like, well-respected Pew. They have a lot of studies on a lot of data and a lot of numbers on, like, politics and political affiliations and how political affiliations have impacted different things. And one that they did a study on is, how Republicans and Democrats view each other overall. And overall, there are more Republicans who acknowledge or, like, recognize or say that they have Democratic friends. About 61% of Republicans will say that they have at least a few friends who are Democrats, Whereas, like, 57% of Democrats will say that they might have a few conservative friends or a few Republican friends. So, props to Republicans out there. Like, the numbers show Republicans are a lot more willing or a lot more open to having friends with different, political views. Um But the study shows that, like, the less friends you have with differing political views, the more negatively you view the other party. So the less friends that you have that are Republican if you're a Democrat or Democrat if you're a Republican, of that opposing party, the less people that you, like, have in your inner circle, like, the more negatively you're gonna view them. The more you're going to see the evil and hear the evil and whatnot that you believe is out there, as opposed to, like, the factual, the based claims, the justifications, the reasonings that will actually give you the real answer to who somebody is intrinsically, right? You're just making an assumption based off of a word as opposed to, like, the fundamental being of themselves. So why I kinda wanted to cover this topic is I had drinks with my friend MB over the weekend, and we're very different politically. She's much more conservative. She's incredibly active in our church, like, she really is loves her Christian faith, is really proud of it, does Bible study, is volunteers a lot. Like, she's a great woman. She's just a great woman across the board. She's frankly what, like, Christians say they are is, they care about others. They're about helping the poor. Bring me your hungry and sick. Like, she really does embody a lot of that. And which I just love. I find that so beautiful. I think I could do a whole spiel about my feelings about religion. I find religion so fascinating and beautiful. I don't practice, but it's more so because I just haven't found one that really, like, aligns with a lot of my values, and I don't I digress. We're going way off left field. I We don't have to go down that rabbit hole right now. But anyway, so she's conservative. We were having we were having beers. And the conversation turned a little political. As it does. I love a political conversation in case you couldn't tell. So it was probably my fault. But she stops me while we're chit-chatting and brings up abortion, and she's like, I'm pro-life, I'm anti-abortion." She's like, "But I really struggle with the idea that, like, women are going to have abortions regardless of if they're legal or not." And she's like, I'd rather have women have abortions in clinics with doctors and have it be healthy and have it be safe, um, as opposed to, like, back alley coat hangers, the incredibly detrimental ways and dangerous ways that we know women will get abortions if it's not accessible to them, regardless of, anything. It's very much like women will do this regardless. We have the data, we know this is fact, and she was like, I'm pro-life, but I really don't know anymore with this mindset, with this thought." She said, I just really struggle with it." And I just asked her, I said, "Do you want my opinion?" And she was like, "Yeah, like, I'd love to hear what you have to say." And I just said, I'm pro-life or pro-choice. I'm not pro-life, I'm pro-choice. I'm pro-life as well, but I'm not pro-life in a that way. I'm pro-choice, because I kind of agree with her. I'd rather it be accessible and safe than inaccessible and, like, happening and dangerous and happening anyway. Um, I said, "I don't believe in using abortion as birth control. I don't believe that it should be a form of birth control. Like, I don't think that anybody really does either. Like, if I were to go out and ask my friends, like, "Hey, like, if do you if you think if you find out you're pregnant with your boyfriend, like, are you gonna go get an abortion?" Like, they're not gonna be like, "Oh, yeah, like, yeah, I forgot like, he forgot to wrap it, so now I have to go get" like, women don't think like that. Like, we don't like getting pap smears every year. Like, and you think we're voluntarily just, like, letting people dig up there and cut things up in there? Like, no, we don't want to have abortions. Women do not want to, like, they don't desire to have abortions, right? Like, it's I mean, maybe there are some out there, but, like, the vast majority, no. So my point was, like, there are situations of rape, incest, your life's at risk. So, like, those situations, yes, like, I believe, like, in those instances, abortion needs to be accessible. And also it's, like, none of my fucking business, right? Like, what you do with your body is on your own time is, like, your own thing. It's none of my fucking business. Like, I don't need to know what you're doing, at the doctor's office. I have no reason to know, like, that you were pregnant last week and this week you're not. Like, it's none of my business, and it's not a politician's business, it's nobody's business but, like, yours and your doctors and possible partners. Um, but I told her this, and I told her, like, like, it's in my opinion, it's better. I agree that, like, it's just better to vote in favor of this accessible thing and making this thing accessible because it's going to do more good for the greater public than it is going to do harm, right? Like, it's one of those situations where it's like, yeah, it's not going to negatively affect another person if you were to go get this done. Like, if you don't believe in abortion, don't get an abortion. If you don't believe in gay marriage, don't have a gay marriage. Like, but don't stop me from doing it. Um, and she, I don't wanna speak for her. I don't we didn't really have a conclusion to that topic. Um, but we did have that conversation, and she was open to hearing me out, and I was so interested in hearing what she had to say. Um in her stance and her political opinions because it helps me understand. It was the conversation was healthy and safe because we both entered it with, we know we have opposing political views, but I have a question that you might have an answer for based off of your views. Like, it was very much an exchange of information. And I think I don't wanna speak for her, but I do think that, she, like, sat with it. I think she, like, like, sat with what I had to say, um, accepted it, and, like, I don't know what her decision is going to be based off of that. I don't know if her, like, opinion has completely changed. I don't know if her stance has completely I don't know, and again, it's none of my business. Um I know that she doesn't like Donald Trump. I know that she thinks he's a bad person, and that's, like, plenty for me, right? Like, that's enough for me to be like, "Okay, we can have a solid friendship even though we had these opposing beliefs." Um, so yeah, we didn't really wrap that conversation up with a nice little bow of like, "Oh, yeah, la-di-da, like, now my entire life has changed," because that wasn't the point, right? Like, the point was, like, "Hey, could you, like, shed some light on this?" And that's all I'm really looking for is, like, just some information. I'm not looking for, like, you to convince me one way or another, but, like, maybe just a different viewpoint to help me understand something was really the point of that conversation, which is exactly what the research is saying needs to be happening. We are this our country is becoming more and more divided because of this bipartisan argument, this bipartisan feud of we can't be friends with people of opposing political viewpoints because they're morally wrong. Our values don't allow all this stuff. Um, by not opening ourselves up to the conversations, we're not opening ourselves up to being able to learn and understand where others are coming from. And again, I'm not saying that we need to be friends with people who are morally wrong, like that we cannot quite mesh with. Like you will never see me be friends with somebody who is homophobic in any way or I do not support that. I don't races like no, none of this. If you're like an Epstein file denier, like those are like values that like we just can't align on and we won't be friends on. But like if your thing is like, oh yeah, like I think Elon Musk like earned his money and I'm like, okay, but he didn't like it doesn't mean that we can't be friends, right? Like it's I'm not gonna sit here and be like, "I can't be friends with you because you trust a billionaire." Like, I ordered half the stuff for this podcast from Amazon. Um, but I do wanna open those conversations. Like, those conversations need to be opened up so that we can feel a little bit more informed, a little bit more secure in our friendships. We can find that sense of empathy, that sense of just, like, general understanding and acceptance. So really, like, where do we go from here? First of all, this fear of losing a friend because of your political views is like a red flag in and of itself. Like I know we talked last week a lot about imposter syndrome with your friends and like this the difference between like some anxiety with your friends and versus imposter syndrome and like where there are grounds and where there aren't. Like you shouldn't fear the loss of friendships from voicing your opinions. If you are afraid of if you're afraid of being true to yourself in a friendship and a relationship, that means that like that relationship is not providing you two of the three core aspects of friendship, right? Like that pleasure, that duty, that empathy. Like if you don't feel you can trust to like your friend to still accept you if you're being true to yourself, that friend is lacking like a sense of duty to you and a sense of empathy for you. They're really not a friend. They're just like a buddy old pal, right? So we really want to focus on like that I'm being true to myself. This is where I stand while still maintaining like that open mind of I'm open to learn, I'm open to understanding where you're coming from. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to change your mind or they have to change their mind or you have to convince each other. Like we're not opening up a debate, we're opening up a conversation. We're not opening up, a convincing study. We're having a conversation. And focusing on the quality of your friendships over the quantity of your friends. Um, focus ensuring that, your relationships with your friends do have that solid ground, do feel secure, and that you feed those relationships a lot more than you feed, like, just those friends that are just your drinking buddies or those friends that maybe you haven't seen them in 10 years. You just like check up every once in a while when you're both home for like Christmas or Easter or whatever the holiday is. Like really, really, like really feeding those friendships that encapture like all three aspects. Another thing I really do, and I said this earlier at the top of the show, is really diffusing the morals and care and values from like a political title, right? Like not all it's kind of like not all men, right? Like yeah, sure, not all men are trash, but it's usually men, right? Like so same thing can be said about Republicans. Like not all Republicans are MAGA. Vast majority of them are, but not all of them are. So being able to like kind of diffuse that and like focus more on I don't care what your title of your political party is. I care more about like your individual beliefs and taking the name out of it, the title out of it, can really, I think, help garner those relationships, help those conversations be more open, and welcoming, and really help us get the chance to, you know, lessen the bias of our own minds, lessen the bias within our own communities. We hear it all the time with the news. Like if you like all the news is skewed towards a political belief, a political opinion. So opening ourselves up to different viewpoints and different political opinions can kind of help break the mold of us versus them, you versus me, this black and white thinking, and kind of help us find a more common ground, a more common understanding. And I mean, the studies are there. I'll post all of my sources in the show notes, of course. But this, if you're interested, the studies are there, kind of talking about, how this has negatively affected us as a society, how this has negatively affected us as people. This closed mindedness that we've been having over our political beliefs and our political conversations. So I really want to leave you with that. Just, while we're with family over the holidays or throughout the summer, when these conversations get really hard or when these conversations come up, taking them with the approach of, I want to learn, not judge. I want to learn, not necessarily have my mind change, but it's all about learning. I think that's the most important part of kind of helping us through this divide and helping us navigate this changed world of um, a very divided country, a very divided nation, and a very divided people. Conversations. They're really, really great. With that, I guess I'm going to leave you guys. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you next week.